I was walking through a district in Tokyo recently that felt like a time capsule. You know, old shrines, the smell of incense, the whole works.
Mm-hmm.
And I started chatting with the local business owner who was incredibly vocal about this concept of Japan first.
Oh, interesting.
He was passionate, practically preaching about the absolute necessity of protecting the national identity against, foreign dilution. He really sounded like a steadfast guardian of the old ways.
Right, I can picture it.
But then the conversation shifted. It shifted to how he runs his business to achieve that protection.
Okay.
And that's when the irony just hit me like a brick. He didn't talk about the patience of the tea ceremony or the depth of traditional craftsmanship. No. Instead, he started aggressively lecturing me on efficiency optimization, rapid scaling, and global benchmarks.
Wow.
Concepts ripped straight out of a Silicon Valley playbook. He was critiquing Western influence while obsessing over Western metrics of success.
That is the perfect encapsulation of the paradox.
It was a perfect, jarring example of this modern paradox.
Yeah.
A nation trying so hard to protect its unique soul that it unconsciously decided the only way to do it was to become exactly like the country it's trying to compete with.
That anecdote, it perfectly frames the challenge we are deep diving into today.
It really does.
It is the core tension defining modern Japan. This struggle between maintaining a unique cultural strength and adopting the necessary global utility.
Specifically, those efficiency and governance models.
Exactly. The ones that the rest of the world has sort of decided constitute success.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've been looking at a fascinating stack of research that investigates this very, very deep tension. And it's not just some academic debate, is it?
Not at all. It affects everything, from corporate balance sheets right down to what's being taught in school classrooms.
So our mission today is really to give you a shortcut to understanding this national balancing act.
That's right. We're going to explore 3 crucial areas where this paradox really plays out.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, we'll analyze the economic structure. The conflict between these relentless efficiency demands and Japan's traditional model of employment stability.
The corporate side of things.
Yes. Then second, we'll look at the cultural impact, specifically how the education system is prioritizing global tech benchmarks over traditional identity.
And
Finally, we'll examine the path toward a conscious rebalancing. We'll be asking the question, how can Japan use technology not to replace its culture, but to amplify its unique strengths for the 21st century?
I think the economic story is maybe the most brutal illustration of this trade-off.
Oh, so?
You just see decades of relationship-based stability vanishing under the heat of a quarterly spreadsheet review.
Yeah.
The financial imperative of global markets forces this transactional mindset onto a relational economy, and the results can be, catastrophic.
It creates a kind of systemic shock because the Japanese economy was founded on trust and mutual reliance. So when you pull one thread, say, supplier loyalty, the entire fabric of production can start to unravel in these really unexpected ways.
Which brings us directly to the case of Hiroshi. This man was a mid-level manager at a legacy automotive supplier in Aichi Prefecture.
The heartland of Japanese manufacturing.
Exactly. For decades, his company operated on this philosophy of Sampo Yoshi.
Can you explain that?
It's the idea that business must benefit 3 parties: the seller, the buyer, and society at large. And this whole ethos led to prioritizing things like lifetime employment and profound supplier loyalty over any kind of short-term gain.
And we really have to emphasize this. That wasn't just corporate benevolence, was it?
Not at all.
That model, prioritizing harmony or and shared prosperity, that was the foundation of the entire post-war economic miracle.
It provided a stability and a quality that Western competitors just couldn't match during that boom period.
Right.
But then the external pressure hit. There was pressure to match return on equity or ROE metrics.
The standard in American corporate governance.
The standard. So the new leadership brought in these external, efficiency-obsessed consultants. And Hiroshi was ordered to cut ties with a small, specialized bolt manufacturer.
Okay.
A company his firm had worked with for 40 years.
40 years.
Just because a supplier in Southeast Asia was 15% cheaper?
And that 15% saving, it looks fantastic on a quarterly report, especially if you're being judged by those US-style metrics focused on maximizing short-term shareholder value.
Precisely. Hiroshi tried to explain the intangible value. He said, that the Japanese supplier would rush over at midnight to fix a defect.
A level of irrational dedication.
Exactly. Yeah. That irrational dedication kept their assembly line virtually seamless. He explained the embedded trust.
And his superiors.
His American-educated superiors just pointed to the spreadsheet. They said, the numbers don't lie. Trust is not an asset class.
Ouch.
So Hiroshi was forced to make the cut. 6 months later, a minor defect in the cheaper transactional bolts caused a massive shutdown and a resulting vehicle recall. The total cost to Hiroshi's company was triple what they'd initially saved.
It's the tragedy of blindly applying a purely transactional model onto a deeply relational ecosystem.
It is.
The entire Japanese manufacturing system worked precisely because of those inefficiencies of trust and loyalty.
Right.
Those deep relationships were a form of quality insurance and risk distribution that simply don't show up on a standard balance sheet.
That spreadsheet might have been green in the short term, but it betrayed 40 years of human capital and relational stability. That is the real hidden cost of chasing these, exogenous ROE metrics.
Yeah.
So let's talk in more detail about that original foundation. What exactly was Japan's original model of stakeholder capitalism that fueled the economic engine during the 50s through the 80s?
Well, as you mentioned, it was built on hyper-coordination, harmony, that concept of wa, and this extreme long-termism.
The goal wasn't just profit.
No, the overriding goal was shared prosperity across the entire industrial ecosystem. Not just shareholders, but customers, employees, suppliers, and the local communities where they were based.
It was about optimizing the group's health.
Exactly. Optimizing the group's health over optimizing individual quarterly performance.
And central to this structure were the Keiretsu, which is often just translated as industrial groups, but the functionality is so much more complex than that.
Much, much more complex. Keiretsu are clusters of independently managed firms that maintain these very close and stable economic ties.
And how are those ties formalized?
Through several interlocking mechanisms. There's cross-shareholding, where member companies hold shares in each other to stabilize ownership.
So they're all invested in each other's success.
Right. Then you have presidents' clubs, which facilitate high-level strategy coordination. And finally, interlocking directorates, where directors often serve on the boards of other group firms.
Let's break down the two main types. I know there's the horizontal and the vertical Keiretsu.
That's right. The horizontal Keiretsu, these are the massive multi-industry conglomerates, groups you might have heard of like Mitsui, Mitsubishi, or Sumitomo.
And they aren't linked by industry, right? It's more about finance.
Exactly. They're linked by finance and trade. At the center of these groups, you would find a main bank, a central insurance company, and crucially, a general trading company known as the Sogo Shosha.
The Sogo Shosho, those are fascinating entities. They're much more than just traders.
Oh, absolutely. Think of them as the ultimate risk distribution and intelligence hubs for the group.
So what do they actually do?
They facilitate global market entry, they manage complex logistics, provide financing. They even launch new ventures for the group members. They are the coordination mechanism that allows these disparate group firms to act with strategic cohesion.
They're like the eyes and ears of the entire intermarket group.
A perfect way to put it.
And then you have the vertical Keiretsu.
Those are industry-specific. They're centered around one massive core manufacturer, like a Toyota or a Hitachi.
And it's all about their supply chain.
It's a multi-layered, multi-tiered system of dedicated suppliers. They focus entirely on optimizing the efficiency and the quality of that core company's product line.
So if the Sogo Shoshi is sort of the brain of the horizontal group, what's the key strategic function of this vertical group?
The Keiretsu, both types, really provided two essential economic functions that underpinned that post-war miracle.
Okay.
First, risk distribution. It acted like a mutual insurance system.
I see. So if one company in the group faced a temporary crisis,
the main bank or the trading company would step in to rescue it. A classic example is the support given to Mazda by Sumitomo Bank back in the 1970s. This stability was prioritized over the kind of creative destruction we see in the West,
where failing firms are just quickly liquidated.
Exactly. They prioritized survival and long-term capability over immediate market correction.
And the second function?
The second was strategic group coordination. This allowed the core company to focus its resources on high-value activities like final assembly and global marketing, while simultaneously protecting its smaller affiliates.
Like Hiroshi's bolt supplier.
Precisely. Protecting them from excessive market volatility. This system ensured that human capital development and crucial know-how remained group-centered, building profound loyalty and high-quality standards across the entire supply chain.
Okay, so here is where the paradox really starts to accelerate. The 1990s, the 2000s, the asset bubble bursts, and Japan faces this waning international investor confidence. And the prescription from global analysts was pretty clear, right? Adopt Western practices.
Specifically, U.S.-style governance centered on shareholder value.
And that pressure led to some very visible experiments, like recruiting non-Japanese Western-style CEOs.
Right, people like Howard Stringer at Sony or Carlos Ghosn at Nissan, they were brought in specifically to introduce those Western governance models and cultural practices.
And that effort created a deep structural contradiction, didn't it? Particularly around the core Western concept of director independence.
Yes, that's a central dogma of U.S. corporate law. Your directors must be genuinely independent of management, of suppliers, of other stakeholders to provide objective oversight.
So what happens when you try to apply that standard in Japan?
Well, when researchers compared U.S. and Japanese board members on this specific metric, the results were almost comical in their disparity.
How so?
They asked directors if their non-executive directors were truly independent, meaning non-employees, non-suppliers, no family ties, no financial ties other than their shareholdings.
The strict definition. And what did they find?
In the U.S. sample, a staggering 90.3% of respondents agreed their directors were independent.
Okay, that makes sense for the U.S.
In the Japanese sample, 100% of respondents disagreed.
100%.
Every single respondent indicated that the directors were not independent by that strict U.S. definition.
Wow. That's not just a statistical anomaly. It's a declaration of a fundamentally different philosophy. If you're an American investor, that statistic suggests there's no genuine oversight at all. But from the Japanese perspective, what does that 100% actually represent?
It reflects the reality of what you could call internalism. Most Japanese directors are men, still predominantly male, who work their way up through the company for decades, often in different group firms, before retiring into a directorship.
So the board is seen as an assembly of veterans.
Exactly. De facto managers whose primary function is to foster internal harmony and provide consensus, not to be an active, critical monitor of top management. The Japanese view is, who better to guide the company than someone who dedicated their entire life to it?
Which makes perfect sense if your goal is long-term consensus.
But it directly conflicts with the Western goal of maximizing short-term shareholder return through vigilant external critique.
And this difference extends to the formal structures of oversight too, right? Like the independent committees mandated by the SEC in the U.S.
Absolutely. The audit and compensation committees.
Right.
Those are non-negotiable for publicly traded U.S. firms. In Japan, they're not yet as widespread or as independent.
And the research shows a difference in expertise too.
Yes, comparative research indicates that U.S. audit committees are far more likely to contain genuine finance experts and financially literate directors than their Japanese counterparts.
Which suggests that in Japan, the selection process for directors values that internal knowledge and long-term experience, human capital management, more highly than strict financial or compliance vigilance.
It's a structural difference that reflects these deep-seated priorities, and it brings us right back to the core conflict that drove Hiroshi's painful decision: shareholder primacy versus stakeholder primacy.
How does the survey data illustrate which of those primacies reigns supreme in each country?
The results are extremely revealing. When U.S. respondents were asked if their boards primarily represented shareholders' interests, 87.2% overwhelmingly agreed.
That is the definition of shareholder primacy in action.
It is.
And Japan.
In the Japanese sample, the dominant response was disagreement at 51.2%.
That is key.
It is. It shows that Japanese corporate culture retains this deep-seated tolerance for deviations from immediate investment returns. They're prioritizing the long-term collective health of the ecosystem, even if it means slower growth or lower short-term ROE.
So the system is designed to absorb shocks rather than pass them on to employees or suppliers immediately.
Precisely. And this is where the cultural difference becomes so critical for the real economy in areas that analysts call exit barriers.
We're talking about decisions like cutting unprofitable business lines, selling assets, or most painfully, laying off employees.
Exactly. In a transactional model, you cut the dead weight instantly to satisfy the market.
But in a relational economy,
the exit barriers related to maintaining stable employment influence Japanese directors significantly more than U.S. directors when they consider shutdowns.
why is that?
The tradition of adjusting employment frequently during negative business cycles has long been regarded in Japan as an irresponsible transfer of business risks to the employee. They view stable employment as part of a social contract provided by the firm.
An essential component of that was, or harmony,
Exactly.
And that stable employment is in itself an asset, isn't it? It allows for massive investment in training and know-how transfer, knowing the employee won't just jump ship to a competitor next year.
Absolutely. But that same asset makes it very hard to be efficient when the economy slows down.
It must create immense internal conflict.
It does. When Japanese executives were asked about meeting performance targets by divesting underperforming lines of business, the textbook American solution, their responses were dramatically bimodal.
Meaning there was a deep split. What was the result?
The resistance to divestiture was extremely strong. 56.1% of Japanese respondents strongly disagreed with the statement that they would divest underperforming lines to meet performance targets.
So even with all the pressure, more than half are still holding the line.
It strongly supports the finding that many Japanese firms are still highly resistant to the kind of aggressive restructuring common in the US and Europe. The cultural inertia towards protecting the group remains incredibly powerful.
This constant pressure efficiency, demanding a cutthroat approach, but culture demanding stability, it must have significantly altered the Keiretsu structures themselves, right? Weakening their original function.
It has. The Keiretsu, which were once so production-focused, underwent what is termed financialization.
What does that mean in practice?
It wasn't just a philosophical change. It was a shift in where the power and the assets lay. Assets shifted increasingly to banks and insurance companies, driven by the desire to pursue global financial norms and to stabilize assets after the bubble burst.
And how did that change weaken the traditional support system?
Two primary mechanisms were damaged. First, that crucial mutual insurance function was eroded by the decline in stable cross-shareholding.
The shares they held in each other.
Yes. For instance, the value-based ratio for cross-shareholding in the Mitsui Group fell by nearly 25% just between 1987 and 2000.
So when firms don't hold each other's shares, they're far more likely to prioritize their own immediate performance.
Over the stability of the group, the stability mechanism just vanished.
And the second mechanism?
Second, the central anchor of the horizontal Keiretsu, the main bank, was fundamentally transformed. Driven by deregulation and financial instability, we saw these massive mergers, like the formation of Mizuho, which reduced the number of major groups from 6 to 4.
And these mergers often involved former banking rivals.
They did.
So the central hub that coordinated strategy and provided risk management was suddenly larger, probably more bureaucratic, and staffed by people who were, a decade ago, competitors.
Precisely. It weakened the traditional identity and the trust of the corporate group. The economic paradox is that by trying to gain global financial acceptance through transformation, they weakened the core relational assets that made them so distinctively resilient in the first place.
That's a powerful illustration of the economic paradox. Trying to adopt efficiency metrics that undermine the very national characteristics that made the original system robust. But this tension, it runs much deeper, doesn't it? Right into the national psyche and culture, particularly in how the next generation is educated.
And that's our second theme. The cultural paradox efficiency versus national identity. The conflict between the digital imperative and the cultural imperative.
I was scrolling through a forum on education reform and found this quiet but painful disconnect happening in a household in Setagaya, Tokyo.
Okay.
It's centered on a grandfather, a master of Shodo Japanese calligraphy, and his 15-year-old grandson, Ren.
And Ren is?
Ren attends a prestigious cram school. He's obsessed with Python, AI prompts, and he views the world through the lens of pure optimization.
The quintessential modern Japanese student, focused on measurable, exportable skills that guarantee global competitiveness.
Exactly. So one afternoon, the grandfather tried to show Ren the ancient preparation ritual, grinding the ink. He explained that the meditative, slow preparation is just as important as the writing itself. It builds spiritual depth, or kokoro.
The integration of mind and spirit.
Yes. Ren, checking his smartwatch, thinking about his next coding project, just politely but dismissively said, "Ji-chan, that's inefficient.
Oh, wow.
An iPad has a brush filter that does this in seconds without the mess. Why waste 30 minutes?
The tragedy there wasn't just that Ren liked technology. It was that he had lost the cultural vocabulary to understand that the mess and the time were the entire point. He sees value only in the optimized output.
That anecdote perfectly captures the strain on cultural identity today. Traditional Japanese culture, whether we talk about the tea ceremony, ikebana, or fine lacquerware, it all emphasizes patience, attention, and internal value.
The value of these arts isn't measured by rapid scale or exportable data points, is it? It's measured by that spiritual integration, the mastery of slow physical practice, and the appreciation of the momentary flow.
They're philosophical practices as much as artistic ones.
Absolutely.
But the modern educational prioritization of efficiency, global tech benchmarks, AI, coding, it pressures younger generations to view their own traditions through this lens of external utility.
If you're trained solely to look for optimization, scaling, and measurable results, you risk viewing your own culture as just data to be optimized.
Rather than a philosophical practice to be lived and inherited, it creates a dangerous gap between the generations.
And this isn't the first time Japan has faced this kind of identity crisis driven by external success.
No, it's rooted in history.
Absolutely not. Japan's approach to modernization since the Meiji Restoration has always involved aggressively absorbing external successful systems, German military strategy, British naval systems, American capitalism, all to defend itself.
So it's created a national reflex.
Unconsciously, yes. A reflex that says, copying or mastering external success is the safest defense strategy against becoming marginalized.
And now the external success is AI and efficiency.
So the reflex is to prioritize those skills, even if it strips away that internal depth.
This cultural tension, it finds its way directly into educational policy, which is the official transferring agent for shared culture, history, and values.
Yes, exactly. And since the 1990s, the Japanese educational discourse has shifted toward a more moral, conservative stance.
What does that look like in the classroom?
The focus has been explicitly on mandating the teaching of patriotism and prioritizing public duty above individual interests. Essentially, it's an attempt at a top-down creation of a unified national identity.
The government is trying to combat cultural drift by installing a sense of civic obligation and national pride into the curriculum. But has this government-mandated approach been successful?
Not without considerable public controversy and skepticism.
It's been met with resistance.
Yes, particularly among the very students the curriculum targets. A survey of college students found that the majority, 55 out of 80 respondents, actually opposed the teaching of national identity.
And why?
They expressed concern about brainwashing or governmental manipulation.
That is a crucial insight. You can mandate the curriculum, but you can't mandate genuine feeling or belief.
The extrinsic motivation of mandated patriotism often results in rejection, and we have quantitative data that really digs into this.
From the 2013 ISSP, the International Social Survey Program.
Yes, which allows us to move beyond anecdotal evidence and look at national trends in the relationship between education and identity.
Okay, so let's discuss the methodology first.
Yeah.
How did the ISSP data even measure something as intangible as national identity?
They measured it using a series of questions related to national pride. They asked respondents about their pride in Japan's achievements in areas like the arts, the economy, science, democracy, and social security.
And a strong identity meant high levels of pride across those categories.
Correct.
So what did the initial straightforward analysis, just looking at years of schooling versus those pride scores, what did it suggest?
Well, the first analysis showed a really counterintuitive correlation. An increase in years of education was associated with a higher likelihood of having weak feelings of national identity.
So the more educated people were, the less patriotic they felt.
The raw data suggested that, yes, the longer students were in the system, the more skeptical or less nationally proud they became, potentially reacting against that mandatory curriculum.
Which is exactly what the college students suggested. A resistance to what they perceive as political indoctrination. But that model only looked at one variable.
Right. It ignored crucial influence from other demographic factors.
So what happened when they controlled for age and sex?
When you control for those demographic variables, the effect of years of education on the strength of national identity became statistically insignificant.
That's a powerful finding. It means simply extending the length of schooling doesn't guarantee patriotic sentiment once you account for the natural differences between groups.
The education system, despite the government's best efforts, is not successfully transferring a strong sense of national identity.
It's effective at transferring technical skills and knowledge.
Highly effective. But when it comes to the philosophical commitment of identity, the policy levers just appear to be ineffective.
So if education length isn't the key driver of national pride, what is?
Age. Age remained highly significant, even after controlling for every other factor. The study showed that an increase in age by 1 year was consistently associated with a corresponding increase in the odds of having strong feelings of national identity.
That is fascinating. It suggests that national identity isn't a curriculum topic to be learned in a semester.
It's a lifelong process, developed over many years and experiences, a deep accumulation of history and shared memory that school just can't rush.
So the older generations who came of age during or right after the post-war miracle retained that strong sense of identity.
Exactly. It was developed over a lifetime defined by collective rebuilding. The current generation, focused on global, immediate metrics and pushed away by government-mandated patriotism, struggles to connect to it.
The system is creating a cultural disconnect.
By prioritizing measurable global utility over unmeasurable internal depth.
This tension, the economic need for efficiency, undermining stability, the cultural resistance to top-down identity building, it paints a picture of a nation really struggling to define its future path.
It does.
So let's transition to our third and I think most optimistic theme, the path forward. How does Japan reconcile the global imperative for efficiency with the need to protect its unique identity and resilience?
This is where we look at the concept of conscious rebalancing, the strategic use of external tools to deepen internal culture. It requires making deliberate choices, not just reacting to external pressure.
And we have a great story that seems to offer a hopeful blueprint for this success. This brings us to Emi and the Kyoto textile business.
Yes. So imagine a small, dusty workshop in Kyoto's Nishijin district. It's famous for its traditional Nishijinori weaving, which is essential for high-end kimonos.
Okay.
And Emi, a young woman from the family, had studied data science in California. She returned home to find her family's failing kimono business on the brink of bankruptcy.
Crushed by cheap, mass-produced imports.
Right. So she faced the ultimate efficiency challenge. Does she automate the weavers out of a job to survive, or does she cling to the inefficient process and die?
And she chose neither.
Exactly. She didn't reject the West, nor did she blindly cling to the past. She used the technological training she gained in California data science and algorithms to analyze decades of her family's archives.
So she was looking at their old designs.
More than that, she looked at historical weather patterns, poetry referenced in their old designs, shifts in classical aesthetics over centuries.
So she used the algorithm, the American tool of optimization, to generate creative insight that was profoundly grounded in Japanese heritage.
Yes, she used data science to generate new avant-garde color palettes and textile patterns based on historical Japanese data. But, and this is the key piece of the blueprint, she insisted that the fabric still be woven by hand on the traditional looms by the master artisans.
She used technology to enhance, not replace, the mastery of human capital.
Well, that's it.
And how did she market this integration?
She marketed them not as efficient clothing or faster kimonos, but as wearable data history.
That's brilliant.
She created a product that was both highly advanced in its design process and profoundly rooted in craftsmanship. She saved the workshop not by imitating American scale, but by using American tools to amplify unique Japanese craft.
Emi's story demonstrates this strategic imperative that really needs to be adopted at the national level. Japan's long-term societal resilience requires this conscious rebalancing.
And this idea of rebalancing is starting to inform economic strategy. The models following Abenomics, things like Kishidanomics and Ishibanomics, are focused on revitalizing the traditional stakeholder system, but with a crucial expansion.
They aren't just trying to go back to the 1980s, are they?
Absolutely not. They are trying to marry the loyalty of the past with the diversity of the future.
So how are they doing that?
The strategies are specifically focused on including traditionally marginalized groups, women, younger generations, foreign talent, and yes, satisfying external shareholders with better returns.
So it's about maintaining the trust of the old model while embracing things like DEI and gender equity.
Exactly. They need new sources of human capital to stay competitive, and the old structure, dominated by lifelong male insiders, simply wasn't providing it.
This push for integration seems essential, especially when you look at how distinct the digital markets are in Japan compared to the West. You can't just copy a U.S. marketing campaign and expect it to resonate.
You absolutely cannot. Digital marketing in Japan demands transformation, not just translation. The landscape is unique. You have over 90% smartphone usage, but the social channels are dominated by platforms like Line, X, formerly Twitter, and the unique powerhouse that is Yahoo Japan. Global platforms have to adapt.
And what do these tech-savvy, quality-conscious Japanese consumers expect from the brands they interact with?
They demand authenticity and aesthetic appeal. Research shows that around 70% of Japanese consumers prefer brands that authentically reflect local values and cultural sentiments.
So generic global campaigns often fail.
They do because they overlook the demand for meticulous detail, high quality, and a profound respect for cultural norms.
So let's look at some successful brands that manage this integration between high-tech and cultural relevance, the ones that turn technology into an amplifier for Japanese value.
Two excellent case studies that follow Emi's blueprint are Uniqlo and Shiseido. Uniqlo, for instance, used the magic mirror augmented reality experience in stores.
The AR functionality that lets you try on clothes without actually changing.
Exactly. This blended high technological novelty with practical shopping utility. It respected the Japanese consumer's preference for convenience and sophisticated yet non-intrusive interfaces.
They used tech to enhance the retail experience while keeping the focus on their core product, quality clothing.
Right. And then you have Shiseido, which has a heritage going back over a century. How did they blend their tradition with digital efficiency?
Good question.
Shiseido, a brand deeply rooted in tradition and excellence, successfully adapted through digital transformation. They were able to combine AI-powered personalization and diagnostic tools with their heritage of exquisite product quality.
So they offer things like virtual beauty services and personalized recommendations.
Yes, successfully resonating with tech-savvy consumers while maintaining their image of artisanal quality and heritage. These brands succeeded because they used efficiency tools to enhance, not erase, the distinct Japanese value proposition.
It seems like the traditional structures, despite the financialization we talked about earlier, still provide these unique models for innovation that facilitate this deep internal integration.
They do. We need to look at R&D and the labor structure.
The Japanese R&D model is distinctively national, isn't it?
It is. When you look at R&D intensity, Japan's was 3.15% of GDP in 2003, one of the highest in the OECD. It is highly concentrated in the business sector.
And that R&D is characterized by close internal collaboration within the Keiretsu and, crucially, low labor mobility.
That's a key difference. In the U.S., R&D often relies on high labor mobility. People jump companies. They bring new ideas, and new firms replace old ones. How does Japan manage innovation with low mobility?
The firms themselves change internally, rather than new firms replacing old ones. Innovation is a collaborative, iterative process within the group, relying heavily on that long-term trust and internal transfer of human capital.
The stability of employment allows firms to invest massive amounts into training, knowing that the employees' know-how will stay within the corporate group.
So that internal focus on human capital is powerfully reinforced by the labor transfer system within the vertical Keiretsu. This seems like the crucial mechanism that keeps the whole system stable and efficient.
It is. The system of labor transfer, where core company managers move permanently or temporarily to subsidiaries and affiliates, serves several key purposes that would be impossible in a highly transactional labor market.
Such as?
Well, first, it maintains incredibly strong communication links across the network. It systematically eases the transfer of complex technology and the specialized know-how from the core company to its affiliates.
Toyota isn't just handing a subsidiary a manual.
No, they're sending a senior manager for 3 years to implement the new process.
And what's the benefit for the core company itself?
It enables the core company to stay lean by moving out managers who are highly paid but might have plateaued in their internal career path.
And it still provides a career path for that manager.
Crucially, yes. It provides a senior management position for them outside the core firm, preventing resentment and maintaining that social contract of lifetime employment, even if they aren't going to be the next CEO.
So the Japanese system uses the stability of its labor relations, that inefficiency of no mass layoffs, to ensure that human capital development is group-centered, building loyalty and transferring critical knowledge systematically.
Which ultimately fuels innovation. In short, the traditional model provided robust structures, financial, human, and technological, to manage complexity and risk internally.
But when Japan selectively adopts external models like the ROE metric, without appreciating the necessary relationship-specific assets that made the original system effective,
they expose themselves to immense and unexpected risks, like the one Hiroshi faced with the bolt manufacturer.
So what does this all mean? We've seen the core tensions. Economically, the struggle to balance employment stability and long-termism with the brutal efficiency of global market metrics.
And societally, the friction between the necessity of global STEM training and the philosophical depth required to inherit traditional arts like shodo.
The conclusion we can draw from examining these cases is that imitation or isolation They're not viable solutions.
No. The path forward, as demonstrated by Emi's success in Kyoto, lies in this idea of conscious amplification.
When Japan uses external technology selectively to ground itself in its own soil,
Using data science to generate color palettes based on Japanese poetry, for instance.
it creates distinct, world-class innovation that can't be easily replicated.
That ability to translate cultural heritage into unique value, using the tool of efficiency not as an end, but as a lens to focus its own distinct strength, that is the ultimate defense.
So the most effective defense of a nation's unique identity isn't imitation or isolation.
No. It's the recognition that its cultural heritage is the most sophisticated and resilient data set it possesses. Focusing on human values and internal depth, rather than merely chasing external efficiency metrics, is the key to sustain Japanese distinctiveness in the modern world.